Well, so last time you and I spoke, we talked on this show, we talked about building the financial foundation for yourself, insurance and savings, and making sure your bases are covered first,
Yep.
which that's all the stuff is. And I would, not obviously being in the financial sector, but I would think those are probably the hardest things for people to do, just because it's always a hope I don't need this. But
Yeah.
you gotta, but when someone ever looked at the foundation of their house and gone, man, that's a great looking foundation. Like
Yeah.
that is done really well.
Yeah.
It's the same with a house or a building. Is the foundation never gets the praise? It's the actual structure that's built on top of it. Unless the
Yeah.
foundation is weak, and then you see cracks all the way up the building. I mean, older buildings, you see that quite a lot.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Everything's built on top of the foundation, so you barely see it, right? Nobody pays attention to it. Nobody cares what color it is or if there's pretty bows on it or any of that stuff. It's the
Yep,
it's the least sexy part of a house, right?
absolutely.
But arguably the most important, right?
Oh yeah.
And then like you said, I mean, if there's a problem with the foundation, it's very hard to fix. Everything that sits on top of the foundation has a problem as well.
Mhm.
Um, and at that point, it either is maybe unfixable, or costs a lot more to fix than just getting it right the first time. So, yeah, I mean, just kind of a brief recap. I mean, as far as your financial foundation, it's the insurances, it's the property casualty insurance like home and auto umbrella, it's the health insurance, it's the life insurance and disability insurance, it's the emergency fund, it's the estate planning, which I just will say about estate planning, like I said last time. I mean, I've been doing this for, 14ish years, and I could count on one hand how many people I've met with throughout my entire career who have their estate planning done and up to date when meeting with them.
Yeah,
And everybody knows they need to get it done. Everybody,
sure.
every time we bring it up, people are like, "Oh yeah, we've been meaning to get it done. We know we need to get it done, whatever," and they just don't.
Yeah.
And it just kind of takes us reminding them and keeping them accountable to it to get it done. And it's just kind of one of those strange things. But I think to your point, all the things on the foundation, none of them are sexy. None of them like make you money, so to speak, or anything,
Yeah.
right? They're all things that you hope you never have to use and you hope is kind of a waste of money and all that other sort of stuff. But I mean, I could really bore you with a ton of examples of people who, had that stuff, or didn't, and something happened and they were either very, very glad they had it or they were very sorry they didn't and wish they did. Right. So,
Absolutely. I want to key in on something you said just right there, is that making sure it's up to date. This isn't a set it and forget it type thing either, is
yeah.
because hopefully your business is growing, your personal, wealth or your personal valuation is growing to where that at a minimum the insurance needs to keep pace with that. I'll tell a story. I might have told it last time about insurance. Is our insurance agent was telling us the story. This is years ago. Actually, he was presenting to a group, but talking about make sure everything's up to date. So making sure it's assigned to the correct person in your life that it should be assigned to. He had a client pass away, and instead of going and visiting the wife, he went and visited the ex-wife because she was the beneficiary on the policy, because this policy was 15 years old, 20 years old. And he said, you want to talk about, and I got to have two uncomfortable conversations. One with the ex-wife saying why it wasn't a particularly good breakup. And so she said, why are you here? I don't want anything to have to do with this or anything. And he's like, I get that. However, like I have to follow what's on the documents here. And it
Right.
says that I'm supposed to come talk to you about this. And then the other uncomfortable conversation is the wife who shows up saying, hey, he said, because they had part of what you had talked about last time is have the conversation so people know what's there, who to talk to, where all the documents are. And so the wife says, hey, he talked about having this life insurance policy. It's like, ooh, yeah, that's true. And now you two need to discuss this. And I guess that was so. There's 3 very uncomfortable conversations that came out of that.
Yeah.
So up to date is something I think is worth talking about.
And it's such an easy fix, man. It really is such an easy fix. It's just, and I get it. People are busy and they got stuff going on, and it's just not
Yeah.
stuff that you spend a lot of time thinking about. But yeah, we've had similar issues go on where a young lady, her husband passed away. She was like 30ish at the time. This was years ago, and they had, I think, a 4 or 6 year old daughter. I can't remember, a young
Mm.
daughter. And the husband had his ex-wife listed as beneficiary on his 401k and had his parents listed as beneficiary on the life insurance.
Mm.
Um, and so, I mean, she got virtually nothing, right? Besides the Social Security that his daughter got to claim, the survivorship Social Security. But um, it, it's just very easy. I mean, we were doing a 401k with a 401k review with a client the other day, and he's newly married, and we always make sure every time. So obviously, anything that we control for a client, we're able to go in and see and make sure that beneficiary is up to date and all that. But like a 401k is something that like we can advise on and help with, but we don't control, right?
Mhm.
So we logged in with him. We were poking around. I was like, all right, first thing, let's make sure we have beneficiaries up to date and all that other sort of stuff. He had no beneficiaries listed, right? So his
Oh,
wife wasn't on there at all. And I was like, all right, well, let's make sure to get that taken care of, which he was very happy we got done. But a lot of people don't necessarily realize that any beneficiary designations override whatever it says in your will. So you could have in your will that,
okay.
like, if you have your estate planning done and up to date, which
Hmm.
is a big if, but you could say, oh, everything passes to my wife or whatever. But if you have your ex-wife listed as beneficiary on your life insurance or retirement or whatever else, doesn't matter what it says in your will. The
Mm.
beneficiary designation overrides whatever that says, and your ex-wife will end up getting it. So you still have to make sure that beneficiaries are up to date on everything,
Yeah.
including bank accounts. They call it, instead of beneficiary, they call it a paid on death or POD. And then some accounts, like maybe you have an investment account with whatever TD Ameritrade or Acorns or whatever. It's called
Hmm.
TOD or transfer on death. So it's just a little bit
Okay.
different, but you have to make sure to go in there and properly do that to make sure that there isn't a lot of that it doesn't have to go through probate. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of nonsense that somebody has to deal with on top of your passing,
Sure.
um,
Right.
if and when that were to happen.
Well, and that's a good point about probate because so if there's not a beneficiary, if there's none of that, it all gets wrapped up in probate court, which I don't have direct experience, but you talk to people who've had experience, and I don't know anybody that walks out of the probate process thinking they got a great deal.
No.
Just really saying, "Hey, that went exactly how I hoped it would go, and everything went smoothly." It's typically it's typically a no-winner situation where because you're asking someone that has no background with the history dynamics of the family or whomever's involved. They have no there's just an outside third party that's going, okay, well, I guess this is fair. I guess that's fair. They're wanting to make sure they're basically looking out for the best interest of the estate without knowing any information about the estate or the players in it or anything like that. So,
Yeah, they don't know family dynamics. They don't know, relationships or any of that stuff. And um, I think people drastically underestimate the potential cost of probate as well, because some of these attorneys will charge kind of like on personal injury, where they charge a percentage of
mm,
what they help you claim. Typically a third, 25% to a third or something like that, maybe 40%. Um, the same can be done on probate where they're getting a percentage of the estate for helping you, through that process. Um, and we had some clients just this past week that he was kind of telling me, he's like, I got some uncles, they own, hundreds of property, hundreds of acres, um, right on this river, and they kind of, pulled up the Google Maps and stuff. Beautiful property. And they're like, it's two twin uncles that ever been married, no kids, any of that stuff. My dad is the only other, like real family member they have, this, that, and the other. And they're like, so, they're in their 80s, and we're imagining we might inherit some of this property at some point. But they were like, they are super, super, I don't want to say do-it-yourselfers, like just not
Yeah.
doers. You know what I mean? Like they probably haven't done anything at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you better find a way to encourage them to see an estate planning attorney, because like kind of walked them through what's going to happen. And I was like, well, something like that, I mean, it's going to cost probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in the probate process for this. And then it's going to take years, and there's going to be a lot of infighting within family members and stuff like that. And all the ugliness is going to come out. So it could be very easily taken care of by spending probably $3 to $5 grand, going to see an attorney, have it all taken care of, and it would save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, years, and a lot of headache. Right. So,
well,
I know that
Shane has that comment in here where he knows somebody that kind of went through a situation like that. He's got a buddy that passed away about a year ago. All of his stuff, business, land, everything is in a probate and still messing with it, which is a mess. And it's typically these things, just from what I've heard, and it sounds like you had echoed this similar sentiment. These are a year is fast track. These are multiple year situations, because it's not, hey, let's sit around a conference room and hash this out. It's, all right, we're going to have the initial meeting or the initial hearing, and then we're going to have you got to file motions. It's a court proceeding, really. And so it's
nonsense. Yeah.
It drags out. And really, I mean, the only ones that win out of that probably are the attorneys that are representing, the different sides.
Yeah. And I got a lot of attorney friends, so I don't mean to,
no,
but
that's a profession.
Yes. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I don't mean to, say anything negatively, but yes,
no,
they're pretty much the only winners out of that, because they're going to get paid for their time and all that stuff. But
they'll have staff, and I mean, it's a business like everything else.
Sure.
So but I think the point here is that you would not want to pass that headache down to anybody, as well as if you get all your ducks in a row, you wouldn't want to willingly just give money away to someone to try to hash out something you should have hashed out to begin with. Is that you could save a lot of money just by doing this up front and ensure, because your affairs better than anybody. So you could ensure, okay, they're going to say this, but based on my history with this, I think this is the way. And in the end, really, you're distributing your stuff, whether it's stocks, whether it's land, whether it's whatever it is. So anyway, this is where foundational stuff comes in.
Yeah, and then I know, one last thing, and I know we'll move on from the foundational stuff, because that's not supposed to be what today's conversation
is important.
About. Yeah, we we're working with a client now, and middle-aged guy, he's got multiple adult children, and he's got a business that's probably worth $12 to $15 million, something like that, and has his estate planning done, has it, I say up to date, I mean reasonably up to date, and things like that. And so we're reviewing everything. He hired us to kind of go through and kind of give a second set of eyes on stuff, and just help him plan, and so on and so forth. So we have our team review trust documents and estate planning documents and things like that. And so what he says he wants to happen, and what he says he fully believes the trust and estate planning documents say, isn't what the trust documents say. So in other words, he's like, well, he plans on selling the business in a handful of years, but he's like, if I die before I'm able to sell the business, then my son, who is basically manager of the business right now, is going to sell it. He's going to get 10%, 10% gross of the sale proceeds, and then the wife will get the rest of it, and it'll go to the trust, and so on and so forth. Well, it says in the trust, first of all, when looking at his tax returns, trust documents, corporate documents, things like that. The name of his business is just a little bit different in almost all of them. So I'm like,
Oh,
all right, well, we need to get all this on the same page and it needs to be fixed. His
yes.
name, because he's, he goes by kind of a nickname. And
Sure.
so they have his nickname in a lot of the documents and not his real legal name. They had his daughter's pre-marriage, name, maiden name,
Hmm.
still in the documents. It said in the trust that his son was going to get 10% net of the proceeds. And basically his wife was going to get it, and then once it sells, she was going to give him the 10%. We're talking about millions of dollars. And I'm like, look, you're going to run into like gift tax issues. You're going to run into
Sure.
like, she's going to pay the taxes on it. She's going to, like, there's all this other sort of stuff. And I'm like, here's a much easier way to do this. First of all, what you fully believe that all this says and what you think is going to happen and what you're setting out to happen, it's not going to happen that way. And it's just I'm kind of sharing this story to say, even if you have your estate planning done and you have a trust or you have this, that, and the other, and you think, I got all this squared away, I'm a big believer in just, it would be worth maybe paying somebody else, maybe another attorney, maybe a firm like ours, it doesn't matter, but just like, hey, can you kind of go through these things to make sure that what I think is going to happen, that this stuff's, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah. Yeah. Second set of eyes.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I just, we humans make mistakes or we misunderstand things sometimes. And
Well,
those
or
can be very big.
they might have also been prepared by several different professionals, right? Just through if
Sure.
depending on how early you started and where you are in the process, we use a different legal firm now than we used 5 years ago.
Right.
So you saying that actually made me think. I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's actually different guys that wrote part of it and that have wrote subsequent parts of it, just as the family grows and as the business grows.
Yeah.
So I can see how that could pretty easily get into some confusion. Yeah. So having one set of eyes review all the documents is probably a great idea too.
Yeah. And that's, and again, there's other firms out there that work the way we do. So I'm
Sure.
not trying to
Sure.
make this sound like a commercial for us or anything, but
Right.
I just think, because attorneys live in the legal world, CPAs live in the tax world, financial advisors typically live in like the investment world, 90 something percent of the time. So I just think finding a firm who can look at all of those things
Yeah.
together and make sure everything is aligned the way it needs to be is incredibly valuable, because I just couldn't tell you how many times, again, CPAs living in his bubble, attorneys living in his bubble, whatever,
Hmm.
and we end up looking at documents and I'm like, these don't jive, right?
Yeah.
Because these people are not communicating, collaborating, or whatever, but like this doesn't flow together the way that it needs to. And nobody's going to catch it because the person doesn't know. I mean, like the average
Sure.
person doesn't speak that language, so to speak, just like I don't speak fence, right? So, I mean, if you were
Right.
telling me
Right.
some sort of complicated thing about how to build a fence, I'm like, that sounds great, man. I don't know,
Sure. Yeah.
I just
Sounds
need the
right.
fence
I guess.
built. Um,
Right.
but somebody's got to catch it, and that somebody has to be you a lot of times.
Sure. Sure. So in recap of the recap, we firm foundation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But that's why it's worth spending so much time on though,
yeah.
because if it's shaky, then once you start building on top of it, it could lead to everything coming down, right? If the
Right.
foundation for whatever reason fails, or it could be really costly to try to unwind and rebuild later on. And that's why it's worth spending so much time now talking about it. Is that's how important it is. Because to your point, the stuff we're getting ready to talk about is more flashy, right? It is
Absolutely.
what people think about as in terms of making money with money, that sort of thing. And a lot of people probably leapfrog the boring stuff, get to the exciting stuff, and say, we'll figure that out later, which isn't the right order. And often that it can't be in that order.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times you're leaving a lot of things